Imagine this. A wealthy couple living on the top floor of a luxury Miami high-rise step into the elevator one summer night in 2001. The doors close. They never come out. Their penthouse is left untouched, dinner still warm on the table, lights still glowing across the skyline. But the couple is gone. No forced entry, no signs of a struggle, just silence at the top of the city. For years, investigators claimed there was no trace, until recently when hidden storage boxes were opened, and inside was a reel of surveillance footage the public was never meant to see. If this happened in your city, what would you believe? And if it were your family who never came back, would you trust the truth or the cover-up? Tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching this from. And don't forget to subscribe, because tonight we're stepping into an elevator that only ever goes one way. It was the summer of 2001, the kind of Miami summer that makes the city glisten with heat even after the sun sinks behind the skyline. Neon washed the streets, luxury cars lined the curbs, and at the top of Biscayne Boulevard one tower stood taller than the rest. It was glass and steel, all edges and elegance, the kind of high-rise where only the very wealthy could afford to live. At its crown sat a penthouse that most people would never see except in glossy magazines. Marble floors, a balcony that seemed to float above the Atlantic, and a view that turned every sunrise into a painting. Inside that penthouse lived Victor and Elena Marquez. He was 52, a real estate developer whose name opened doors from Miami to Caracas. She was 44, once a model, still beautiful in the way that drew eyes even when she wished it wouldn't. Together they were the sort of couple who seemed untouchable, wealthy, stylish, and wrapped in a life where champagne flowed more often than water. But money has a way of hiding cracks, and neighbors whispered about arguments behind closed doors, voices that carried down the marble hallway when they thought no one was listening. On the night of June 18, 2001, the Marquez couple hosted a small dinner party in their home. 4 guests came. The wine was expensive, the conversation shallow. Around midnight the guests left, each one remembering Elena's smile at the door and Victor's hand heavy on her shoulder. The city glittered outside, humid and alive, but the penthouse grew quiet. Just after 12:30 a.m., building security noted something strange. The Marquez elevator reserved only for penthouse use descended. Cameras in the lobby caught the doors opening, but no one ever stepped out. The car returned to the top floor minutes later, empty. No staff saw Victor or Elena leave the building. Their cars remained parked in the garage. Their cell phones stayed on the marble countertop. And when morning came, their bed had not been slept in. The penthouse itself told its own story. A half-finished bottle of wine on the table. 2 plates of food half-eaten, as if interrupted mid. Elena's jewelry laid neatly on the vanity. Pearls she never left home without. Victor's wallet resting on the bar, cash inside. Nothing missing, nothing out of place, except for the people who were supposed to live there by the next day. The staff began whispering. Had they gone away suddenly? Was it some kind of secret trip? But the rumors died when Victor's business partner showed up, banging on the door until security opened it. He found silence, dinner plates still waiting, and the sound of the air conditioning humming in empty rooms. He dialed the police, his voice sharp. Something is wrong. The investigation began quietly, as it always does with the wealthy. Detectives walked carefully across imported rugs, asking polite questions of neighbors who had seen nothing. But when they checked the building's surveillance system, the story twisted into something darker. Every angle of the lobby was accounted for. Every car that entered or left the garage had been recorded. Yet from midnight until dawn, there was no sign of Victor or Elena. And then came the detail that would haunt investigators for decades. The elevator logs showed the penthouse car had been used 5 times that night, but only 2 rides had been explained, the guests leaving at midnight. The other 3 entries between 12:30 and 2 o'clock a.m. showed the elevator traveling down, opening at the lobby, and returning to the top. Each time, the cameras showed the doors slide open to reveal nothing, no couple, no one at all. It was as if the building itself had swallowed them. But wait, the strangest part wasn't even the elevator. It was what investigators found inside the penthouse closet. A suitcase packed, sitting upright as though ready for a trip. Except it contained nothing of practical use. Inside were photographs of Victor and Elena on vacation, Elena laughing on a beach, Victor in a suit with his arm draped around her. There was jewelry, valuable pieces, tucked inside shoes, and at the bottom, folded so carefully, it seemed intentional, was a receipt for a safety deposit box dated 3 years earlier. A box that, when checked, had been emptied and closed. Why would someone pack memories instead of clothes? Why would the wealthy leave behind their wealth? Detectives pressed building staff harder. Had anyone seen anything? A late-night visitor? A service call? One guard, pale and sweating, finally admitted he had noticed something he hadn't logged. Around 1 a.m., while smoking outside, he swore he saw the reflection of the elevator doors open in the glass across the street. He flicked his cigarette, glanced up, and froze. He said it looked like people were stepping out, but not onto the lobby floor. Instead, they seemed to vanish between frames of light, like the camera skipped, he whispered, like they walked out of one world into another. No one believed him. Not then. The official file labeled the case voluntary disappearance. Investigators suggested the Marquez couple had staged their vanishing, fleeing debts or enemies, but friends argued otherwise. Their accounts were clear. The couple was wealthy, yes, but not reckless. Elena adored her family. Victor's business was thriving. Why leave everything behind? Why leave the lights on, dinner uneaten, bed untouched? Theories grew like mold in the Miami heat. Some whispered mafia. Others pointed to offshore accounts and dangerous investors. But the rumors had no proof, and the case quietly cooled. The building remained occupied, the penthouse eventually sold, and the Marquez names slipped into whispered legend. Until a decade later, when the FBI received a call from a storage facility 30 miles outside Miami. Inside an abandoned unit, rented under a false name, were boxes of tapes, dust-covered reels of surveillance footage, and among them, one labeled simply, Penthouse Elevator, June 18, 2001. The storage unit smelled of mildew and rust, the way paper smells when it has been forgotten too long. Agents pried open the boxes carefully, gloves on, breathing masks tied across their faces. Most of the reels were ordinary grainy footage from garages, stairwells, and lobby doors, but the one marked in thick black ink Penthouse Elevator June 18, 2001 was different. It was labeled with a date burned into Miami memory. The day Victor and Elena Marquez had vanished. The tape was rushed to the field office, sealed in evidence bags, then threaded into an old playback machine. A monitor hummed, and the screen flickered alive, static, lines of interference. Then, suddenly, the image steadied. A black and white view of the lobby elevator doors, timestamp in the corner, 12:29 a.m. for long minutes. The footage showed nothing unusual. Guards at the front desk, guests leaving, a man checking his watch. Then the elevator doors slid open, empty. The timestamp ticked forward, but no one exited. The doors lingered, then closed again. The agents leaned closer. Another sequence began. At 12:47, the doors opened once more. This time, faintly, something flickered across the screen. A blur, almost human, but distorted, as if the lens couldn't decide how to capture it. Some frames showed what looked like Victor's shoulder, Elena's profile. But their bodies weren't moving naturally. They seemed to flicker in and out, stepping forward, then sliding backward, like the tape itself was fighting to hold them. But wait, one of the agents rewound the reel, replaying the same seconds frame by frame. At 12 hours 47 minutes and 6 seconds, Elena's face was visible, her eyes wide, mouth open as if calling out. At 12 hours 47 minutes and 7 seconds, she was gone. Only static and shadow remained. The elevator doors closed. The reel rolled on. At 1:12 a.m., the doors opened again. This time, two figures stood inside. Victor and Elena, clear, as real as the night they vanished. Victor had one arm around Elena, steadying her. She clutched his jacket, her knuckles white. They looked terrified, but alive. The agents leaned forward, their pulses pounding. And then the impossible happened. The couple stepped forward, but not onto the lobby floor. Instead, they seemed to vanish halfway through the doorway, their bodies dissolving into static before their shoes touched the marble. The camera kept rolling. The lobby remained empty. The room went silent. The agents replayed it again and again, trying to catch the trick. There was no cut, no splice, no sign of tampering, just the impossible disappearance of two people in real time. And then came the most chilling moment of all. At 1:44 a.m., the doors opened one last time. The elevator was empty, at least at first glance. But in the corner of the frame, just before the doors slid shut, something appeared, a handprint, pressed against the inside of the glass. Small, delicate, unmistakably Elena's. The screen went black. The agents sat frozen, the hum of the machine filling the silence. One finally whispered, "What the hell did we just see?" Word spread quickly through the bureau. A case once labeled voluntary disappearance was suddenly alive again. Files long buried were reopened. Agents began re-interviewing everyone, neighbors, staff, business partners, but the elevator tape refused to be explained. Experts brought in to analyze the footage claimed it was authentic. No digital manipulation. No cuts. Whatever happened that night, the camera had caught it. When the Marquez families were finally shown the reel, Elena's sister collapsed into sobs, her fingers clawing at the screen. "She was calling for us," she cried. Victor's brother slammed his fists against the table, shouting at the agents, "You knew all along." But the truth was, no one knew. No one could know. Outside, Miami kept living. The high-rise still glowed against the skyline. New residents sipping champagne on balconies where Victor and Elena once stood. But inside the bureau, whispers grew. If the couple hadn't left the building, and their bodies hadn't been found, then where had they gone? Theories multiplied. Some said kidnapping, pulled off by professionals who erased their tracks. Others whispered about hidden floors, secret exits, but one detail haunted the investigators most: the final handprint. Smeared against the elevator glass, still visible in the last frames before darkness. A mark that should have been wiped away years earlier, yet remained like a plea from the other side. And as the Bureau prepared to release a statement to the public, another envelope appeared at headquarters. No return address. Inside was a still image, clearly printed from the same tape, Elena's face, her mouth open in a silent scream, and across the bottom, scrawled in red ink, "Not the first, not the last." The message rattled everyone who saw it. Not the first, not the last. It wasn't just a taunt, it was a claim. Whoever had left that photograph wanted investigators to understand that the Marquez case was part of something larger, something ongoing. The Bureau convened quietly in a Miami conference room, the kind where the blinds are always drawn and the air feels recycled. Files spread across the table, names and dates scribbled on whiteboards. They began tracing patterns, asking a dangerous question: had other wealthy couples vanished in similar circumstances? The answer came faster than anyone expected. In 1997, a couple named Harold and Diane Green disappeared from a penthouse in Atlanta. No signs of forced entry. Dinner left on the table. Security cameras showed the elevator operating without passengers. The case was filed away as a voluntary disappearance in 1999. In Houston, Richard and Amanda Cole vanished from their high-rise suite. Their cars were still in the garage. Neighbors reported hearing the elevator moving at odd hours that night. The file was thin, unsolved. And now, in 2001, the Marquez case, the similarities were undeniable. Each involved a wealthy couple. Each disappearance occurred inside a luxury breeze. Each left behind untouched meals, unmade beds, possessions still in place. And in each, the elevator logs showed trips with no passengers exiting. But wait, it wasn't just the pattern, it was the geography. Atlanta, Houston, Miami cities, lined up like markers on a map, tracing the spine of the country. 3 cases spread over 4 years, all filed quietly, none receiving national attention. Until now, the Miami task force grew tense. Was someone or something hunting couples in these towers? Was there a network covering its tracks? Theories flew across the table, some grounded in crime, others straying into the unexplainable. Then came the second envelope. This time, it wasn't a photo. It was a key card, plain white, with no identifying marks except the handwritten number on the back. 14. Technicians analyzed it. The magnetic strip was clean, unused, but the design matched a brand of security key common in the early 2000s. The kind used in office buildings and private elevators. Agents scoured the Marquez building records. Every key card was accounted for. None matched the number 14. Theories bloomed again. Was it a missing MasterCard? A card to a hidden floor? The handwriting on the back seemed deliberate, almost ceremonial, as if the sender was daring the Bureau to try it. Meanwhile, journalists began circling. Rumors of the hidden elevator footage leaked, whispered between reporters who'd been stonewalled too many times. The Marquez family lawyer stood on the courthouse steps, demanding answers, demanding the footage be released to the public. But the bureau held it close, terrified of what panic might follow if the images of a vanishing couple ever went wide inside the investigation. One detail gnawed at the agents: the handprint. In the final frames of the elevator footage, Elena's palm had pressed against the glass. When they magnified the image, something else appeared, barely visible, but unmistakable. Letters traced in condensation. It wasn't random smudging, it was writing. 3 characters, scrawled by a fingertip. SOS, the discovery hit like a thunderclap. Elena had been alive, aware, and pleading for help. Somehow, inside that elevator, she had found enough clarity to leave a message. The agents replayed the moment over and over, watching her hand fade as the doors closed, the letters vanishing into the black and white static. But here's where everything shifted. When they compared the footage to the Atlanta and Houston cases, one analyst found something chilling. In both of those older investigations, evidence photos showed partial prints on glass, faint, dismissed at the time as smudges, but under new analysis, they weren't smudges at all. They were letters. In Atlanta, HLP in Houston, run, different couples, different cities, same desperate messages left behind. The task force couldn't ignore it anymore. These weren't isolated vanishings, they were connected by design, by ritual, by some force, whether human or not, that stalked the highest towers of America's richest cities. Late one night, Agent Ruiz Young, restless, still haunted by the real, made a discovery that chilled him. While reviewing the Marquez tape frame by frame, he noticed the timestamp glitching. For a handful of seconds, the digital numbers flickered backward, not forward, not frozen, backward. 1247 became 1246, then 1245, then it corrected itself. He sat frozen in his chair, staring at the monitor. The footage wasn't just capturing reality, it was bending it. And when Ruiz filed his report, a senior agent scrawled a note in the margin, a phrase the Bureau hadn't used in decades, but that now felt alarmingly appropriate: Project Ferryman. Under the fluorescent hum of a federal records room, the name sat there like a rusted nail. Project Ferryman. The folder wasn't thick. Secrets rarely are. But the index card clipped to the front carried enough weight to tilt the room. Time, discipline, vertical conveyance, anomalies, containment protocols. You read it twice to be sure your eyes weren't inventing the words. They weren't. It began, according to the oldest memo, in 1963, an elevator in a defense building that stopped on a floor not listed in the blueprint. Staff stepped in on 12, stepped out on something else. For 3 minutes, the call buttons across the building froze. When the doors reopened, the car was empty except for condensation on the rear glass and 3 soft imprints like knuckles. The memo's final line: do not synchronize clocks with exterior reference while elevator incident in progress. It read like superstition written by an engineer. But wait, Ferryman wasn't a single incident. It was a policy that trailed anomalies like a shadow. A 1971 file from Chicago, a 1979 entry from Manhattan, each used the same phrases: ghost floor, passenger mismatch, clock skew, plus or minus 300 seconds, each ended the same way: containment prioritized over retrieval. Somewhere once, someone had decided that closing the door was safer than pulling anyone back through it. You'd like to believe this is folklore. Then the Miami building superintendent, drawn into the bureau under subpoena and fear, produced a photocopy of a schematic labeled Service Access 14. The tower marketed itself as 53 floors. The elevator panel in the penthouse showed 52 buttons. As in most high-rises, there was number 13, but the maintenance print showed something else: a non-public stop between 12 and 14, a thin slice of nowhere, serviced by a different circuit, and scrawled by hand in the margin: keep clocks at -5. Where did this come from? Agent Ruiz asked. The superintendent didn't meet his eyes. From the installer. We were told never to use it, never to sync, just never. The key card with 14 on the back burned a hole in its evidence bag. Techs cloned it. Readers refused, then relented, then threw error codes that didn't exist in their manuals. When they tried it against the service call panel, the diode didn't turn green or red. It turned amber, the color of a stalled traffic light, and stayed there like a held breath. There was still the real. Agents tried to steady their heads with process, redigitize, frame, compare, histogram match, but process staggered under something the tape didn't mind doing in the open. Tick backwards at 12 hours, 47 minutes and 6 seconds, Elena's face. At 5, a smear. At 4, her mouth almost forming the S in SOS. Then, forward again, as if time had slipped on a wet tile and caught itself on the rail. One of the older analysts, a woman who wore her hair pinned like a promise and had outlived 3 program names for the same office, wrote 3 words on the whiteboard and underlined them twice. Do not sink. She circled the elevator chime in the audio track, the soft, dumb ding that means arriving, and showed how it trailed the time stamp by exactly 5 seconds when the distortions began. The car's clock, she said, tapping the screen, wasn't on the building's time. You want an answer that uses words like spoofing and attack vector. The Bureau would prefer that too. But the footage did not care. It showed you what it had and asked you not to blink. That's when the pattern widened again. Ruiz, hunched over a bank of old CRTs that made everything look like yesterday, noticed a microstamp burned into the lower corner of a frame, a manufacturer's ID string for the camera head. Same model as a lobby unit pulled from a Houston tower in 1999. Same vendor on the Atlanta case in 97. Same service company on all 3, a regional firm that had since been swallowed and renamed twice, leaving behind only contracts and an invoice template that still used a typewriter font. An address surfaced an old warehouse near Hialeah, a place that survived by forgetting to be noticed. The team went in on a Tuesday, not because Tuesdays are safer, but because Tuesdays pretend to be dust racks, metal cabinets, bowed by humidity. In the back, a cage with a padlock so clean it looked like a recent regret. Inside, a stack of labeled reels and a plastic banker's box marked retention-14.14. They cut the lock. Inside lay not recordings but clocks, analog wall units with their faces taped at 5 minutes off, 2 metronomes, both set slightly slow, a jar full of elevator chime buzzers wired to a toggle, and beneath them, wrapped in brown paper, a slim binder stamped Ferryman Field. The tabs were stoic: entry, hold, exit. The instructions were worse for being simple. If entry is observed, hold clocks at -5, do not correct, do not chase the sink. If exit is attempted, maintain offset. Admit vehicle. Anchors first, no definition followed. One note, hand-scribbled, had been added to the exit tab later in blue ink. People are not anchors. Ruiz swallowed. What's a vehicle anchor? The old analyst only shook her head. Not a person, she said. That's what it says. Miami at night does not care about your paperwork. It hangs itself in timidity and neon and waits for you to remember you're human. The task force hauled the box back to the tower. They had one stupid thought in common and said it out loud to make it less stupid. Try the cart. At 3:11 a.m., under the unblinking stare of cameras they hoped were still telling the truth, Ruiz and 2 agents rolled the service panel open. The amber LED above the slot blinked like a slow eye. He slid the cloned 14. The LED steadied to that same held-breath amber. The relay inside clicked. Somewhere above them, metal answered metal like a throat clearing. Hold every clock, the analyst said into her radio. Phones off. Wristwatches wound 5 minutes behind. The lobby wall, clock battery out. The elevator chime module from the warehouse on a cart, powered and ticking a tiny beat. The car arrived without ceremony. No ding, just the doors spreading as if embarrassed to be caught. Inside, mirrors, not the smoked glass of a luxury cab. Plain, bright, honest mirrors that showed 3 agents in shirt sleeves, trying not to flinch, and a 4th person you didn't want there at all. Your own fear. Ruiz stepped in. The car didn't move. The analyst said. He slid the card into a slot no one remembered seeing before. The panel did not light 14. It lit nothing. It simply sighed. A gentle change in air pressure you feel in your ears more than on your skin. The floor indicator flicked to a dash. The doors did not close. The room did. You felt it in your teeth first, the tiny buzz right before an elevator decides to forget which way gravity thinks is down. The metronome on the cart clicked and then took one extra fractional beat, like a runner leaning just a little too hard into a turn. The clock, you'd gutted, dared to tick anyway and then thought better of it. The lobby didn't change. The car, that its mirror showed the lobby 2 degrees wrong. The potted plant against the far wall skewed itself into a corner that had never been built. The reflection of the service desk lost its pens. From the perspective of the glass, The night manager had never bought any. Ruiz lifted his hand. His reflection lifted just slower than him, then caught up like a friend jogging late. Hold, the analyst breathed. At 5 o'clock on the little contrarian metronome, the car chose. The indicator didn't count floors. It exhaled parallel lines that could have been 11, or pause, or door. The seam between the car and the lobby became a thought instead of a line, and then you saw it, not inside the car, in the mirror. The lobby reflected there wasn't the one you were standing in. It was clean and bright and new and wore different art. And in that lobby, inside that reflection, the elevator doors opened to a couple braced together. Victor, jaw set the way. A jaw gets set only once you've learned how many deals a life requires. Elena, chin up, eyes scanning for the person holding the camera. They stepped, Victor first, Elena's hand on his sleeve. He made it halfway through the doorway and distilled, not into light or smoke, into nothing you have a word for. Elena turned back at exactly the beat where a person begs time for a favor. Her palm hit the glass hard enough to leave a print. You could almost feel on the wrong side of your own hand. The metronome tried to match itself. The little chime buzzers in the cart took the same breath every building's elevator takes when it's ready to ding. The analyst slapped the toggle down. Silence fell, the way a curtain falls before anyone bows. Pull him, someone whispered. No, said the old analyst, voice flat. We don't bring people first. That's what it says. Anchors first. What anchors? Ruiz hissed. What does that mean? The mirror answered like it had been waiting. A rectangle slid against the lobby floor over their suitcase. You'd seen in photographs of the penthouse closet, hard-sided scuffed where 100 airport conveyors had disrespected it. It skated to the threshold in the reflection and touched the seam between worlds with the intimacy of a key finding its lock. The metronome faltered and recovered. The suitcase slid across your car floor, not on wheels, as if the floor had remembered it. It bumped Ruiz's shin. He grabbed the handle and the weight landed in his arm with the real physics of a real object. He lurched, half out of the car, half in. Because that's what bodies do when told two truths at once. Back. The analyst snapped. Back, back, back. They didn't breathe until the indicator blinked itself into a normal integer, and the door remembered how to be a door. The suitcase sat there indecently. Not a ghost, not a vision, a thing. It had a smell. Agents stared like schoolchildren who'd been shown fire for the first time. Ruiz knelt. The case had a baggage tag from a flight that didn't exist. Under the strap, in Elena's slanted hand, Marquez. You want to scream, and you want to cry, and you want the manual to have a page for this. The page it has says, containment preferred over retrieval. The page you need says what to do next. They moved the suitcase to evidence, and didn't open it yet because ritual matters even when the floor just tried to forget you. The analyst logged time, offsets like a priest logging scenes. Ruiz stood in the car alone for a second. That was more than a second, and let his own reflection catch up to him. That's when the lobby call button lit by itself, not the main one, the little round hidden one that only service staff know. The bulb swelled amber. The chime that should have been silent for 5 minutes struck a single bright note and then held it until the sound turned into pressure from the elevator speaker. Under the static the building denies it can make, came a voice. A woman's, not panicked, focused the way people get when they've decided to use their last sentence wisely. Don't follow, she said. Wait your turn. The line crackled. The mirror showed only the room it owed you. The indicator returned to numbers that wanted to be boring. The suitcase clicked. Not the latch. Something inside settling. They opened it under lights no one on the janitorial staff would ever believe they'd paid for. On top lay a stack of photographs you hadn't seen since the closet. Lena, laughing on a beach. Victor pretending not to enjoy, pretending he was a man the ocean could not move. Beneath the photos, a jewelry box that had belonged to a woman who raised daughters to lift their chins. Beneath that, a plastic badge from a company that had changed names 3 times and still used a logo designed in 1984. And under everything else, a single ticket like the kind that buys you a ride on a thing that spins. Admit one on one side, nothing first on the other. The old analyst set the metronome on the table by the suitcase. It ticked stubbornly at -5 o'clock. Vehicles, she murmured. Anchors first. Ruiz stared at the ticket and knew what cliff looked like from the lip. What happens, he asked, when it's our turn? No one answered. The lobby call button bloomed amber again. The service lead blinked. The mirror in the car took on that oil-slick sheen glass gets when it's deciding whether to stay a mirror, and from somewhere behind the panel, deep in the elevator's small, unreasonable heart, you heard it 3 soft knocks, patient as a tide, asterisk. The 3 knocks echoed inside the elevator shaft like a heartbeat trapped in steel. Ruiz froze, his hand still on the edge of the suitcase, knuckles white against the leather handle. The sound wasn't mechanical. It wasn't the groan of cables or the settling of gears. It was deliberate. 3 measured raps, as if someone on the other side of the mirror was politely asking to be let in. The agents exchanged glances, but nobody moved toward the doors. They knew instinctively that if the mirror wanted them to open, it would open itself. And so they waited, standing, in a silence so thick it felt alive. The amber lead above the card slot glowed steadily, unblinking, and in that glow the room seemed to tilt. "Hold the clocks," the old analyst whispered, her eyes fixed on the metronome. Its arm swung stubbornly at its 5-minute offset, refusing to match the rhythm of the wall clock ticking faintly on the other side of the room. She tapped the desk with her fingernail, counting the beat aloud. 1, 2, 3, 4. Her voice faltered when the knock came again. 3 taps, perfectly synced with her count, but half a second behind, as though time itself was mocking her. But wait, the mirror inside the elevator was no longer reflecting only the agents. It shimmered faintly, its surface rippling like water in a breeze. And then shapes appeared, dozens of them, faint silhouettes pressed against the glass from the wrong side. Men in suits, women in dresses, children clutching toys, their faces blurred, smeared by static, but their eyes unmistakably human. Among them, Elena Marquez, her hand slid against the glass, tracing letters in the condensation. SOS. The agents surged forward, but the old analyst snapped, "Do not touch it." Her voice cracked like a whip, pulling them back from the threshold. She pointed at the reflection. Elena's handprint was fading already, as though the mirror refused to let her plea linger too long. Then another figure appeared beside her vector, but he wasn't alone. Behind him, half hidden in shadow, stood someone else, a man in a dark suit, his face blurred beyond recognition. His hand rested firmly on Victor's shoulder, holding him back. And though the reflection was silent, his intent was clear. They do not leave. Not yet. The mirror darkened, one by one. The faces vanished until only black glass remained. The amber lead above the slot flickered, then went out. The elevator dinged once, soft and ordinary, as though it had simply arrived on the wrong floor. No one spoke for a long time. The hum of the building filled the silence, the sound of normal life resuming around them. But everyone in that room knew nothing about this was normal. Later, in the evidence lab, they laid out the suitcase contents again, the ticket, the jewelry box, the photographs, and beneath the photos, something none of them had noticed before. Folded into a corner of one picture's frame was a slip of paper, yellowed and brittle. Ruiz carefully teased it out with tweezers. Written in smudged pencil were 4 words, "We are still inside." The paper was tested, scanned, analyzed. It was old, older than 2001, older even than the Marquez marriage. The fibers dated back decades, as if someone else, another missing passenger from another city, had slipped this note into the suitcase long before it ever touched the Marquez. "Closet not the first," Ruiz whispered, remembering the taunting message on the earlier photograph. His throat went dry. "And not the last." That night, the Bureau drafted a classified memo, pattern confirmed. 3 cases linked by time anomalies and passenger vanishes, further disappearances likely. Recommend immediate containment protocols. But behind the bureaucratic language was the same fear sitting heavy in every agent's chest. This wasn't a case anymore. It was a system. And systems don't stop on their own. The slip of paper sat under glass like a fossil, and yet it hummed with a living message. "We are still inside." You stared because that's what people do when the truth is small and the room is big. The lab had dated the paper older than the Marquez marriage, older than their penthouse lease, older, maybe, than the tower itself, which meant the suitcase had been somewhere else before it was theirs. Somewhere that collected things the way elevators collect floors quietly, inevitably. So, you pull a thread, you go backward. The Bureau dragged the old files out of their boxes, Atlanta 97, Houston 99, and then further back, into cabinets that smelled like carbon paper and cigarettes. A clerk from records wheeled in a cart and said a sentence you didn't expect to hear in 2001. You'll want the microfilm. On those reels lived a different country typewritten reports, Polaroids taped at the corners, elevator logs printed on green bar paper, and there, between missing person forms and property room signatures, a pattern opened like a trapdoor. 1968, Chicago. A couple celebrating an anniversary at the top of a brand new tower never checked out. Dinner trays left in their suite. Cash in the dresser. Elevator ran for unlogged trips between 1 o'clock and 2 a.m. The final incident note. Glass condensation observed. Letters indeterminate. Someone had scribbled over the word indeterminate in red pencil and written HLP with a question mark. 1969, Dallas. A honeymoon suite with a view of lights pretending to be stars. Two newlyweds taken by a night no one heard arrive. Elevator logs jammed with error codes text couldn't reproduce later. Body of report, no cameras on this property. Margin note, don't install, underlined twice. 1970 Manhattan. A co-op too expensive for anyone to admit to fear. Couple vanished between cocktails and bedtime. Doorman swore the lift opened and no one was there, then closed like it forgot what it was doing. Photos included a shot of the elevator glass with streaks that looked like fingers dragged through steam. The chain of custody ended in a stamp. Project Ferryman contained, but wait. The paper from your suitcase, the one that said we are still inside, wasn't just old, it was familiar. The handwriting matched a note from a 1984 Los Angeles file, a case labeled voluntary departure. In the summary and don't tell the family in a handwritten addendum, nobody in that case, a brother had disappeared from a hotel's top floor, leaving behind only a room service cart and a smear on the elevator mirror. His girlfriend mailed a letter to the local paper a week later. He called, it sounded like an echo. You can't prove the suitcase has been through all those rooms. You can only feel it. The way luggage learns a life, the way corners remember turns. Ruiz built a map on the conference room wall with pins and red thread because sometimes the thing you need isn't a database but a picture you can walk around. It wasn't random. The cases lined up along an invisible route like a private rail. Chicago to Dallas, to Manhattan, to Atlanta, to Houston, to Miami, skipping years but keeping faith with something that didn't tire. A route that climbed only the tallest buildings, as if altitude were part of the ritual. Every pin connected to one vendor name, then another, as companies swallowed each other and left their logos in the bones of the contracts. In the margins of a 1971 invoice for signal harmonization, a service even the vendor couldn't define, someone had written -5 minutes beside a tiny drawing of a clock. Time discipline, the old analyst reminded you. Tapping the memo with a knuckle. Ferryman isn't a story about where, it's about when. So you test the when. No press release, no heroics. Just a sealed lobby at 2:07 a.m., phones in a Faraday bag. A wind-up watch set, deliberately wrong. You bring the warehouse metronome, the jar of chime buzzers, the cloned 14 card, and the suitcase, because maybe it's an anchor the way the field guide hinted, maybe it holds the weight that makes bridges behave. You set the metronome 5 minutes slow and start it ticking. You tape over every LED you can find, because numbers are the kind of truth that follows orders too closely. You breathe, and you wait for the air to change. It does. Not dramatic, just that tunnel pressure behind your ears. The tiny hairs on your forearm rise like the room has remembered a draft it didn't have. The amber lead above the service slot blooms without help. The elevator arrives. No chime. The doors open like a thought you try not to have. Inside, mirrors. Too honest, too bright. The suitcase sits on the car floor like a pet waiting at a door. Ruiz slides the 14. The panel doesn't show a floor. It shows again. You feel the sigh. Hold the clocks. The metronome insists on its little rebellion. The world decides whether to forgive it. And then the mirror gives. Not all at once, in layers, like a photograph in a tray. The lobby in the glass is not yours. It's the same room, younger by years. The paint can't count. The potted plant is alive again. The art is wrong. The marble has no scoffs in that lobby. The elevator doors open. Two figures. Not Victor and Elena this time. Different people. A man with a mustache out of 1979 and a woman with a scarf, knotted the way magazines taught in 1973. Their faces are lit by hope's worst cousin, certainty. They step. Your body wants to reach. Your training says anchors first. You choke on both and hold. A box slides over the far marble. Not a suitcase now. A film canister, dented. Yellow label, half peeled. Manhattan Jewel, 79. It nudges the seam and crosses into your car like a story that finally found the right word. It's heavy the way metal is heavy when it's carried memory across decades. Ruiz scoops it like he's catching a child coming off a slide. The couple in the mirror pause at the threshold, as if listening to a rule. The woman turns, sees you, and mouths something you almost recognize not by sound but by shape. Wait, she points down, not at the floor at the clocks. Then she backs away, one step, two, and vanishes the way morning vanishes a dream. You were sure you could save. You close the doors because leaving them open feels like leaving your ribs open. Back under lights. The canister creaks. Inside, 16 millimeters, film nested like a sleeping thing. A white leader strip at the head bears blue wax pencil. Co-op lobby cam. A Jewel 17. The lab doesn't have the right projector. Of course it doesn't. You drive across town to a university that still teaches film the way it teaches Latin, and ask a professor who wears his keys on a lanyard, like true belief, to thread it. You sit in a dark room with 10 folding chairs and a screen that deserves more hope than most. The image jumps, steadies, breathes, grain swims. A lobby arrives that could be any lobby and is exactly the one from the file. People in good coats. A doorman with a posture that explains a life. The elevator doors. At 1:19 a.m., the car opens. Empty. The time stamp in the corner is a superimposed clock that stutters once, catches itself, and continues. At 1:27, the car opens again. 2 figures stand inside. He steps. He thins. She reaches. Her hand slides down the glass like rain. In the last frames before the leader goes white, letters bloom on the inside of the door in breath you shouldn't be able to read from here. 3. Run. The room stays quiet long after the reel flaps empty. The professor lifts his glasses and says nothing. Because there are nights when academia remembers humility. You carry the canister back like a relic. The field guide's tabs feel heavier now. Entry, hold, exit. The blue ink note under exit. People are not anchored stairs like a wound that scabbed wrong. News will leak. You know it. A concierge will talk. A neighbor will say, I heard a chime at the wrong time. A reporter will print a word that doesn't help. Portal, wormhole, hoax. Families will light candles anyway. Windows will be covered anyway. Elevators will be rode a little less at night. Stairs will get more faithful feet. You tell yourself you're collecting proof. But proof keeps arriving with a condition attached. Do not sink. Wait your turn. Anchors first. The rule feels less like science now, and more like etiquette extended to a thing you don't want to anger. Then, one humid morning on Biscayne, the building engineer calls Ruiz to the roof. Not because something broke, because something was left. On the maintenance hatch of the penthouse elevator, taped with blue painter's tape a human would choose when trying not to scar a surface, sits a metronome. Identical to yours. Its arm swings calmly at -5 o'clock. Beside it, a Polaroid weighted with a coin. The photo shows the Miami lobby from an angle no camera is mounted to see. In the reflection of the elevator's glass, a woman with her chin lifted mouths a single syllable. You already know too well. Soon. The coin keeps the picture from blowing away. One side reads, admit one. The other is blank. You tilt it to the light, and the missing words rise ghost pale, like letters under eraser dust. Nothing. First, tries to write itself there. Fails. Waits down in the lobby, without anyone touching a thing. The service led over the 14 slot warms from dead to amber. Patient, unblinking as if the building itself has just raised a hand to ask, are you ready to hold the door? The amber lead held steady above the 14 slot, a single unblinking eye. It wasn't calling for attention, it was waiting, patient, confident that someone would answer. Ruiz stood in the lobby with the Polaroid still in his hand, the tick echoing faintly from the roof. The photograph's edges curled in the humidity, Elena's face half lost in the white border, her lips frozen on that one syllable. Soon, no one wanted to move. The bureau agents who had come to trust procedure above instinct felt that invisible pressure again, the sense of being observed from somewhere they couldn't map. They taped over wall clocks, powered down phones, set the metronome on the floor, and let it swing its stubborn -5 beat. Still the LED glowed. Still the air hummed with expectation. But wait, Ruiz whispered, mostly to himself. What if answering isn't what they want? What if waiting is the trap? His voice bounced off the marble too quickly, like the building itself didn't care to keep it. The old analyst, the one who had lived with ferrymen longer than anyone, stepped forward. Her shoes clicked softly. She didn't reach for the slot. She didn't need to. She carried another object in her bag. The suitcase, the one that had delivered the note, the jewelry box, the photographs. She placed it gently on the lobby floor, directly in front of the elevator doors. Anchors first, she said, voice quiet but unwavering. The metronome faltered, just once, then caught the beat again. And the amber lead blinked off as if nodding. The doors shuddered. They didn't open, they breathed, the seam between them trembling as though bracing for something heavy on the other side. And then the knocking began again. 3 taps, then silence. 3 more, louder this time, sharp enough to rattle the mirrored surface. Ruiz pressed his ear against the cold glass. From inside, muffled a voice, not Elena's, deeper. Male, help us. The words were wrong in every possible way. Too slow, like they had traveled through water. Too steady, like they'd been rehearsed. And behind them, whispers layered upon whispers. Dozens of voices speaking all at once. None clear, none alone. A chorus of people insisting they were still there, still waiting, still trapped. The old analyst yanked Ruiz back. Don't listen, she hissed. That's not them. That's the building talking. But how do you turn away from the sound of the lost? How do you ignore pleas that line up perfectly with the names in your files? Ruiz stared at the glass. He could swear he saw faces forming: Victor's, Elena's, the couple from Manhattan, the newlyweds from Dallas, all pressing forward, all silently begging. The LED flared brighter. The amber light spilled across the marble floor like liquid. The elevator dinged once, a perfect, cheerful chime. The suitcase slid forward an inch on its own. The doors began to part. Everyone froze. The gap widened, blackness yawning beyond, darker than any shaft should be. No cables, no counterweights, no machinery, just void. And in that void, movement, dozens of pale hands, reaching out, clawing toward the light. One of the younger agents screamed. Another lifted her sidearm, but the old analyst slapped it down. You don't shoot at time, she snapped. You hold it. You wait. The hand scrabbled at the suitcase, tugging it into the dark. Ruiz instinctively grabbed the handle, fighting the pull. The weight nearly dragged him inside, the void swallowing the sound of his grunts. Then, just as suddenly, the resistance vanished. The suitcase tumbled back onto the lobby floor, inert, heavy, ordinary again. The doors slammed shut. The LED died. Silence. No one moved for a full minute. Then Ruiz bent, panting, and unlatched the suitcase. Inside, everything was the same: jewelry, photographs, the yellowed slip of paper, except for one new addition. A photograph, glossy and fresh, still smelling of chemicals. The Miami lobby. Them, standing right there, exactly as they were in that moment. Ruiz bent in the frame, hand on the suitcase. The analyst's eyes wide, mid-blink. The amber lead glowing above the slot, and scrawled across the bottom, in red ink, you are inside too. It doesn't feel like a case anymore. It feels like a room you've already stepped into, and the door behind you has decided it prefers being a wall. You stand in the Miami lobby with the fresh photograph in your hand inside the photograph, and you try not to think the thought. The red ink orders you to think you are inside to . So you do the only thing that ever worked. You make rules and you hold them like a breath. Don't sync the clocks. Don't chase the chime. Anchors first. Vehicles only. Wait your turn. You say them out loud the way people say prayers in storms, not because the words control the wind, but because the words keep your hands from doing the wrong thing. Outside, the city does what cities do. Elevators rise. Elevators fall. People glance at their reflections and check their hair and never wonder if the mirror is checking them back. Upstairs, a metronome ticks at 5 o'clock on a roof no one visits for the view anymore. Downstairs, the amber lead above 14 sleeps like a cat with one eye open. But wait, the message on the photo doesn't go quiet in your head. You are inside too. At first you argue with it the way you argue with a voice that sounds too much like your own. If inside can be carried across a door, then inside might be a condition, not a place. If inside can be printed on paper, then inside can be mailed. If inside can be photographed, then maybe inside was there the whole time, waiting for you to look long enough to agree. You test the only lever you have. Order, you bring what the ferryman field notes called vehicle anchors, and you try to give them back: the suitcase, the film canister, the jar of chime buzzers, a brass lobby plaque pulled from a tower in Atlanta that never put the number 13 on any button and thought it had outsmarted luck. You line them in front of the doors, like offerings. You hold the clocks 5 minutes off and keep them that way when the building pretends to correct you. You wait for the seam to breathe. It does. Not every night. Not on command. But on a Tuesday that pretends to be safe. The amber lead exerts its calm. The air tightens behind your ears. The doors, Part 3. Fingerwits. The elevator glass ripples. In the mirror you see the lobby, as it looked when new, as it will look when refurbished, as it never looked at all. 3 times at once. And beyond that, faces a dozen, 2 dozen, more. Some you know by name. Some you know only by the shape. Grief made in a file. You don't call to them. You put your palm on the suitcase and slide it forward until its shadow touches the seam. It crosses with the small, satisfied weight of a key finding home. The film canister follows. The jar of chimes goes last. And as it tips into the dark, a single buzzer pings the saddest ding you've ever heard. The faces don't rush. They don't cheer. They don't vanish. They settle. The mirror unwrinkles. The seam closes. The LED dies. The lobby exhales like a person who chose to keep a secret. It should feel like progress. It feels like etiquette. That night, 3 emails arrive, from nowhere to an inbox you never put on a form. Each contains a single, still image and no text. Chicago, 1968 lobby mirror. Condensation letters, now readable. HLP we wait. Dallas, 1973 lavender glass, with a child's finger marks like stars. A caption burned into the corner by old chemistry. Not yet Manhattan, 1979 handprints layered until they look like wings, and under them, scratched into the film emulsion, with something sharper than hope. Soon, the old analyst reads them and rubs her eyes with the heel of her hand. They're teaching us order, she says, voice raw. Or they're punishing us for not knowing it sooner. You try not to think about punishment. You think about clocks, because clocks are honest liars. They tell you exactly where you are on a circle and call it a line. The ferryman memos called it time, discipline like time were a dog on a leash that heals if you know how to whistle. You don't know how to whistle. You buy wind-ups by the dozen anyway and set every one 5 minutes slow. You lay them out on a table like tins at a bake sale and start them all. The sound fills the room like rain. And still, the city's clocks try to kiss yours. Phone towers push time into your pocket whether you want it or not. The building management system pings the elevator controller at the top of every hour. A polite handshake that feels like a threat. The metronome on the roof ticks, and then stutters, and then decides to be stubborn again. And you love it like you love people who refuse to be corrected when correction would kill them. One night the amber light warms without warning, and this is new. The hall camera blinks, not off bat. The feed rolls 3 seconds in reverse and then forward again, like a tide deciding how far to reach. The elevator doors slide open to a seam you've learned to respect. And in that seam, you see not faces, not hands, not words, things, vehicle anchors you didn't return because you didn't know they were anchors. A leather-bound guest book from a Houston tower, with a signature Elena would have admired. A car key on a velvet fob. A child's red sneaker with a gold star sticker stuck to the sole. Anchors first, you whisper, and the whisper has a taste rust and ozone in the back of your throat before you say a thing you can't unsay. You take the guest book and the key and the tiny shoe as carefully as you would lift a sleeping child. The seam narrows. The mirror fogs. In that fog, a fingertip writes 3 letters and stops as if remembering the cost. SOU. Close because you promised yourself you would. You close because the room tilts when you forget who's allowed to go first. But wait. The elevators across town begin to misbehave. The overnight news runs a segment that calls it a software update glitch, which is another way to say everything happened at once, and the anchor desk hates coincidence. A power outage in Brickell doors that refuse to close in a tower on Collins. In a condo off the bay, a teenager films an elevator indicator flipping between floors that don't exist. 12, 14, Dozy, the comments call it a filter. The mother who sends you the clip does not. Fairview - yes, that town. The one that taught you to count knock sends an email nobody should ever be able to send. We think your clocks match ours. Attached. A photo of a funhouse mirror catching a corridor that shouldn't be there. Attached. An audio file with a chime that pings 5 beats after it should. Attached. A single line typed all the way at the bottom like a person trying not to bother you. Do we hold the door for you, or do you hold it for us? You build a chain you hope can hold a country. Miami, Houston, Atlanta, Manhattan, Chicago, Fairview. Because it refuses not to be invited. 6 rooms, 6 metronomes, 6 teams agreeing to live 5 minutes wrong for a night. You don't broadcast, you don't brief. You put your phones in a drawer like a sin. At 11:06 p.m., the amber leads wake in 3 cities at once like fireflies. Practicing a song, at 11:11, all 6 gear changes on 6 floors that never met each other. The rule sings in your bones. Do not synchronize with anything but us. You line the anchors, guest books, keys, shoes, a Polaroid that smells like chemicals, and summer, the film canister, from a city that already forgave you once. You breathe through 10 seconds that bend and test and threaten to snap. You feel the seam. You feel the pressure. You feel the thing behind the mirror take the weight and offer nothing you are not allowed to take. And then, like a friend tapping a window to show you they made it home, something simple happens. A ring, gold, plain, nicked in 2 places at the bottom where a hand that worked for a living met a doorframe 100 times. It rolls out of the seam onto the elevator floor, spins a circle, and falls toward you. You catch it without thinking because catching is what hands are for. Inside, faint and almost shy, are 2 letters you know, V+E. The room forgets it knows how to breathe. The old analyst puts a palm on the table. Ruiz stares at the ring like a person stares at the moment. A decision becomes a life. This isn't a suitcase, or a canister, or a trophy for remembering rules. It's a piece of someone. It's an answer that looks too much like hope. Don't follow, the voice had said. Wait your turn. Maybe turn is not a door. Maybe turn is a year. Maybe turn is a city. Maybe turn is a person. Maybe tonight it was the ring's turn. And not the fingers it belongs to. You put the ring in a bag and you apologize to it the way you apologize to the living. You set it beside the coin with admit one and the other side that never quite prints nothing first unless the light hits just so. You do not call the families yet because there are sentences you get only one chance to say, and you refuse to say them while the seam is still learning your name. Morning comes blunt and ordinary and wrong. Espresso machines hiss. The elevator plays its cheerful ding at all the polite moments. Someone on the 34th floor gets stuck between 12 and blames maintenance with a rage that makes them feel safe. A talk show host jokes about haunted lifts. A columnist writes, "We have always lived in the future," and gets paid. You go home for an hour and sit in a kitchen you no longer trust. The mirrored kettle on the stove reflects you at a slightly cruel angle. You set the metronome beside it and make it tick the kitchen 5 minutes into a softer world. You wash your hands for no reason and dry them on a towel that reads "Bless this mess," and it feels like advice from a better person. And then the phone on the counter lights without ringing. No number, no name, just one word, home. You do not answer, because obedience is another name for love, and because you promised a woman's voice you would wait your turn. The screen goes dark, the metronome ticks. Your reflection in the kettle looks away first. Asterisk. At 9:17 p.m., 6 amber leads in 6 cities warm like sunrise under metal. The teams move the way people move when they believe they might be the hinge instead of the door. Anchors in, hands off the seam, clocks held wrong on purpose, which might be the purest definition of faith you've ever practiced. The mirrors ripple, faces arrive, not all, never all, enough to prove a thing you wish didn't need proving. Elena mouths a syllable you have learned to lip read soon. Victor lifts 2 fingers, the way men lift 2 fingers across rooms to say, "I see you." Behind them, a crowd. Chicago wool, Dallas sequins, Manhattan posture, Atlanta church shoes, Houston Astros cap, Fairview denim with a Ferris wheel button pinned for luck. A child presses his sneaker red, gold star on the sole against the glass like a stamp. The seams hold. The clocks hold. Your nerve holds. The room, the city, the 6 rooms in 6 cities, and the air between them decide not to break. And then, the mirrors do what they do best. They go back to being furniture. You inventory what the night returns. A ring engraved with V plus EA guestbook signed by hands that still write somewhere. A film canister that now weighs a gram less for reasons that make your stomach tighten. A Polaroid of a lobby you stand in, taken from an angle no camera owns, with a message written in a familiar, tired, defiant hand. We'll try your way. This is where I leave you tonight. Not because the story has ended, because stories like this refuse. Not because the rule is clear, because the rule keeps changing its tense. Not because the ferryman is satisfied, because ferrymen are never paid in full. I leave you here because the door, for now, prefers being a wall, and because your turn might not be a door at all. It might be a ring, a key, a photograph, a clock that refuses to be corrected. So you tell me, what do you think this is? A government experiment that slipped its leash, a network of elevators tuned to a time we don't measure, a curse that learned how to ride reflections, a bargain the kind old cities make when they build too high and forget to bow. If they can't come first, who should? And when soon becomes now, do you hold the door or do you look away and keep the clocks wrong to save what you love? Because some stories were never meant to stay buried. Don't let them vanish. Keep them alive with us.